The December wind cut through downtown Chicago like a blade, carrying the sharp scent of snow and diesel exhaust. Lucy Anderson stood outside the Fairmont Hotel, watching through the grand windows as wedding preparations unfolded in warm, golden light. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as she clutched her phone, reading the text message for the third time. Lucy, I'm sorry, but after discussing with Brad's family, we think it's best if you don't attend the ceremony. You understand, right? His parents are very traditional, and we don't want any distractions. Love you. Emma. Distractions. That's what she'd become to her own sister. Lucy pulled her coat tighter, the familiar ache in her left arm reminding her why she was standing in the cold instead of helping her baby sister with her veil. The scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow seemed to throb in the winter air, a permanent reminder of choices made in split seconds, of metal and fire and the weight of another person's life in her hands. Ma'am, are you coming in? The doorman's voice was gentle, concerned. She must have been standing there longer than she realized. No, Lucy said quietly. I'm not on the list. She turned away from the warmth and headed down Michigan Avenue, her military-issued boots steady on the icy sidewalk. 3 years since she'd come home from Afghanistan. 3 years of family dinners where conversations stopped when she entered the room, of Christmas gatherings where her mother would suggest long sleeves to avoid questions, of being introduced as Emma's sister who's between jobs right now. They never asked about the scar. They never asked about anything, really. Her phone buzzed. A voicemail from her mother. Lucy, honey, I know you're upset, but please understand, the Blackwoods are very important people. Brad's father is an admiral, and they have certain expectations. Maybe you can come to the reception. Just wear something with long sleeves. Okay? Lucy deleted the message without listening to the end. She'd heard enough. Back in her studio apartment in Wicker Park, she sat on her threadbare couch and opened her laptop. The job search tabs were still open. Security positions, logistics coordinators, anything that might value her skills. But every interview ended the same way. The moment they saw the scar, the atmosphere changed. Too visible. Too much of a reminder of things people preferred not to think about. She closed the laptop and picked up the photo frame on her coffee table. It showed her and Emma at Emma's college graduation, both smiling, Lucy in her dress uniform. That was before the deployment, before the convoy, before everything changed. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with the weight of unspoken words and uninvited truths. Tomorrow, her baby sister would marry into a military family who thought Lucy wasn't good enough to witness the ceremony. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd faced insurgents, IEDs, and impossible decisions in the desert. But somehow, the rejection from her own family cut deeper than any shrapnel ever could. As snow began to fall outside her window, Lucy made a decision. She wouldn't go to the reception. She wouldn't put on long sleeves and pretend her service was something to hide. She'd survived too much to play small for people who couldn't see past a scar to the story beneath it. But sometimes, life has different plans. Chapter 2. Christmas Eve, Reckoning. 2 days after the wedding, Christmas Eve arrived with all the forced cheer of a family trying to pretend nothing had happened. The Anderson family home in Lincoln Park glowed with traditional decorations. White lights strung with mathematical precision, a 12-foot Fraser fir that Lucy's father had spent hours perfecting, and enough poinsettias to stock a greenhouse. Lucy sat in her car outside, engine running, heat blasting against the 20-degree night. She'd promised her mother she'd come. Just for dinner, Patricia Anderson had pleaded. It's Christmas Eve, Lucy. Whatever happened with the wedding, we're still family. Family. The word felt hollow now. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The burgundy dress was a compromise. 3/4 sleeves that mostly covered the scar, but didn't completely hide it. She wouldn't wear long sleeves. Not anymore. Not for them. The front door opened before she could knock. Her mother stood there, perfectly coiffed in Christmas plaid, her smile bright but nervous. Lucy! Oh, honey, you came! Patricia's eyes immediately went to Lucy's arm, then quickly away. Everyone's in the living room. Emma and Brad are here, and Brad's parents, too. They're staying in town for the holidays. Perfect. Just perfect. The living room was exactly as Lucy remembered, tastefully decorated, conversation flowing like expensive wine, everyone positioned as if for a holiday card photo. Emma sat curled next to Brad on the love seat, still glowing with newlywed happiness. Lucy's father, Robert, stood by the fireplace discussing investment portfolios with Brad's mother, and there, in the wingback chair like a king holding court, sat Admiral Nathaniel Blackwood. The conversation stuttered when Lucy entered. Lucy! Emma's voice was too bright, too quick. You made it. Wouldn't miss Christmas Eve, Lucy said evenly, accepting the glass of wine her mother pressed into her hand. She found a spot on the couch, aware of the careful distance everyone maintained. Brad's mother, Constance, if Lucy remembered correctly, kept glancing at her arm with the kind of fascinated disgust usually reserved for car accidents. So, Lucy, Constance finally said, her voice dripping with false concern, Emma tells us you're job hunting. That must be challenging. It has its moments, Lucy replied. I imagine that injury doesn't help matters. Constance gestured vaguely toward Lucy's arm. Have you considered cosmetic surgery? I know an excellent plastic surgeon in the Gold Coast. He does wonders with disfigurements. The room tensed. Emma looked mortified. Patricia's smile became even more fixed. It's not a disfigurement, Lucy said quietly. It's a scar. Well, yes, but it's so prominent. Constance sipped her wine. It must have been a terrible accident. What was it? A car crash? I always tell Brad to be careful on Lakeshore Drive. Lucy felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came when civilians tried to imagine her world and came up with fender benders and kitchen accidents. Something like that, she murmured. You know, Cousin Janet chimed in from across the room, already 3 wines deep. They have amazing makeup now that can cover almost anything. Have you tried that Dermablend? I saw it on YouTube. This woman covered her entire tattoo sleeve. Very festive topic, Robert Anderson said weakly, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. How about those Bears this season? But Constance wasn't done. I just think, for professional reasons, you understand, appearance matters so much these days. And that scar, well, it's the first thing people notice, isn't it? You don't want to be defined by one unfortunate moment. Lucy's hand tightened on her wine glass. One unfortunate moment. As if those 47 seconds in the desert could be reduced to an unfortunate moment. As if the choice to go back, to not leave anyone behind, was unfortunate. Mom, Brad said uncomfortably, maybe we should... I'm just trying to help, darling. Your father always says, address the elephant in the room. And honestly, Lucy dear, at events like the wedding, well, you understand why we were concerned about photographs. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma's face had gone pale. Patricia looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. And Admiral Blackwood? The Admiral was staring at Lucy with an expression she couldn't read. Photographs, Lucy repeated softly. Right. Wouldn't want any visible reminders of imperfection in the wedding album. She stood, setting down her wine glass with careful precision. I should go. Lucy, please, Emma started. No, it's fine. I understand. Some scars are too ugly for polite company. She looked directly at Constance. Even when they're earned saving someone's life. She was halfway to the door when Admiral Blackwood's voice cut through the room like a command. Stop. Chapter 3. The Admiral's Truth. Admiral Nathaniel Blackwood rose from his chair with the kind of deliberate movement that made everyone else freeze. At 62, he still carried himself like he was on a destroyer's bridge, shoulders square, eyes sharp as a hawk's. He'd been silent most of the evening, observing, but now his presence filled the room. Sergeant Anderson, he said, and Lucy stopped mid-step. He'd never addressed her by rank before. Turn around. It wasn't a request. Lucy turned, meeting his gaze steadily. That scar, he continued, his voice carrying the weight of command. I need to know how you got it. Nathaniel, Constance said nervously, I don't think... Quiet. He didn't even look at his wife. His eyes remained fixed on Lucy. Sergeant, Lucy lifted her chin. Vehicle fire, Afghanistan, 2021. Where in Afghanistan? Highway 1, outside Kandahar. The Admiral's face changed, something flickering in his eyes. Date? September 15th. The wine glass in his hand trembled slightly. He set it down carefully on the mantel. What unit? 507th Transportation Company. Jesus Christ, Admiral Blackwood breathed. He sank back into his chair as if his legs had given out. Jesus Christ, it was you. Nathaniel? Constance looked alarmed. What are you talking about? The Admiral's eyes never left Lucy's face. September 15th, 2021. A convoy was hit by an IED on Highway 1. The fuel truck exploded. 3 vehicles were involved. His voice grew hoarse. A sergeant went back into the fire, pulled out 4 soldiers. One of them was a Navy intelligence officer attached to the convoy. The room was utterly still. That officer, the Admiral continued, was my son, Lieutenant Michael Blackwood. Not this son. He gestured to Brad, who looked stunned. My oldest, Michael. Lucy remained silent, but her posture had shifted, almost imperceptibly straighter. The report said, the Admiral's voice cracked. The report said the sergeant suffered second and third-degree burns pulling Michael out, that she went back into a burning vehicle while ammunition was cooking off, that she dragged him 30 meters to safety while her left arm was on fire. Constance's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. They told me the sergeant was medically discharged. They gave me a name, but he stood again. Slowly. I tried to find you, to thank you, but you disappeared into the VA system, and they wouldn't give me information. Dad, Brad whispered, you never told me? Because Michael asked me not to. He was embarrassed. Embarrassed that he'd frozen, that someone else had to... The Admiral's voice broke completely, that someone else had to burn for him. Lucy finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. He didn't freeze. He was unconscious from the blast. There's no shame in that. He's alive because of you. The Admiral took a step forward. My son is alive, has a wife, has 2 children, because you... He gestured helplessly at her arm. And we banned you from the wedding? We said you were a distraction? The silence in the room was suffocating. Emma was crying silently. Patricia had her hand over her heart. Robert looked like he'd been punched. Mrs. Blackwood, the Admiral turned to his wife, his voice hard now. This woman, who you suggested needed to hide her disfigurement, earned that scar pulling our son from a burning vehicle, while her arm was on fire, while ammunition exploded around her. She ran toward death while everyone else ran away. Constance looked sick. I didn't... No, you didn't. He turned back to Lucy. None of us did. We sat here, in our comfortable lives, drinking wine and discussing plastic surgery, while a hero stood in front of us, reduced to an unfortunate moment. Lucy's jaw tightened. I'm not a hero. I did my job. Your job. The Admiral laughed bitterly. Your job was transportation, not combat rescue, not firefighting. You chose to go back. Anyone would have... No. His voice was firm. No, they wouldn't have. 3 other soldiers were there. They tried to stop you. Said it was too dangerous. The report was very clear about that. Brad stood slowly, looking at Lucy as if seeing her for the first time. You saved my brother? I didn't know he was your brother, Lucy said simply. I didn't know who he was. He was just a soldier who needed help. And you've been walking around my family. Brad's voice grew thick with emotion. Letting us disrespect you. Letting us ban you from the wedding. Letting my mother suggest you hide the very scar you earned saving Michael's life? Lucy, Emma sobbed. Why didn't you tell us? Lucy looked at her sister, and for the first time that evening, her composure cracked slightly. Because you never asked. None of you ever asked. You saw the scar and made up your own story. Accident, mistake, something to be hidden. It never occurred to any of you that maybe, just maybe, it was something else. We're your family, Patricia whispered. We should have what? Lucy's voice sharpened. Should have seen past your discomfort? Should have recognized that your daughter might have done something more than get in a car accident? I came home 3 years ago, and not one of you, not one, asked me what happened over there. You were too busy being embarrassed by how I looked. The truth hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Chapter 4. What Comes After. Admiral Blackwood moved with purpose, crossing the room to stand directly in front of Lucy. The height difference meant she had to look up at him, but somehow she seemed taller. Sergeant Anderson, he said formally, I owe you a debt I can never repay. My son is alive because of your courage. His children have a father because you made a choice that left you permanently marked. He paused, his voice thick. And my family, myself included, repaid that debt with ignorance and prejudice. He did something then that shocked everyone in the room. Admiral Nathaniel Blackwood, 35-year naval veteran, commander of fleets, came to attention and saluted Lucy with military precision. Lucy's breath caught. Slowly she returned the salute. When he lowered his hand, his eyes were wet. I'm going to call Michael tonight. He needs to know I found you. He never stopped looking either. He names his daughter Lucy. His voice broke on the last word. Said he wanted her to grow up knowing that real courage exists in the world. The room erupted. Emma launched herself at Lucy, sobbing apologies. Patricia kept repeating, I'm so sorry, like a mantra. Robert stood frozen, tears streaming down his face, and Constance Blackwood sat in her chair, face white, staring at Lucy's scar as if seeing it for the first time. Stop, Lucy said quietly, but firmly. Everyone froze. Please, just stop. She took a breath, steadying herself. I don't need apologies. I don't need hero worship. I don't need any of this. She looked around the room at her family. What I needed was to not be ashamed. What I needed was to not hide. What I needed was for my own family to see me as more than damaged goods. Lucy, Emma started. I'm not finished. Lucy's voice was calm but unyielding. You banned me from your wedding because of how I look, because Brad's important military family might be offended by visible proof that war leaves marks. The irony is almost funny, isn't it? Brad stepped forward. Lucy, I swear I didn't know. If I had known, that's the point, Lucy interrupted. You shouldn't have needed to know. I shouldn't have had to earn the right to attend my sister's wedding by having saved your brother. My worth shouldn't be dependent on whose life I saved or didn't save. She was right, and everyone in the room knew it. What can we do? Patricia asked desperately. How can we fix this? Lucy considered the question. You can start by seeing me. Not the scar, not the hero, not the embarrassment. Just me, your daughter, your sister, a person who went to war and came home changed like thousands of others. The wedding, Emma whispered. Oh God, Lucy, I'm so sorry about the wedding. We'll have another ceremony, Brad said suddenly. A reception, something. You should have been there. No, Lucy shook her head. You can't undo it. And honestly, I don't want you to. What's done is done. Then what? Robert finally spoke, his voice rough. How do we move forward? Lucy looked at each of them in turn. Her mother, who'd spent 3 years suggesting long sleeves. Her father, who changed the subject whenever anyone mentioned her service. Her sister, who'd chosen perfect wedding photos over family. The Blackwoods, who'd judged without knowing. We start with tonight, she said finally. We start with you actually asking about my service, about what happened, about who I am now, not who I was before I left. We start with you seeing this scar not as something to hide, but as part of my story. I'd like to hear that story, Admiral Blackwood said quietly, if you're willing to tell it. Lucy studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but if we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. No interruptions to tell me how brave I was. No tears about how hard it must have been. Just listening. Everyone nodded eagerly, repositioning themselves around the room. As Lucy settled back onto the couch, she noticed something had shifted. The careful distance was gone. Emma sat next to her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Patricia took her other side. The wall that had existed for 3 years had cracked, if not completely crumbled. It was my second deployment, Lucy began, her voice steady. September in Afghanistan is still hot, over 100 degrees that day. As she spoke, telling the story she'd never been asked to tell, the Christmas lights seemed warmer somehow. Outside, snow continued to fall on Lincoln Park, blanketing the neighborhood in quiet white. Inside, a family began the long journey of learning to see each other clearly. It wouldn't be easy. 3 years of silence and shame couldn't be erased in one night. But as Lucy described the weight of her fellow soldier, the smell of burning fuel, the decision that took less than a heartbeat to make, something fundamental shifted in the Anderson family home. Later, much later, after tears and questions and long overdue conversations, Admiral Blackwood made a phone call. Lucy could hear half of it, could hear a younger man's voice break with emotion through the speaker. Michael Blackwood wanted to fly in immediately, wanted to bring his family, wanted to say thank you in person. After the holidays, Lucy said gently when the Admiral held out the phone. Let's just, after the holidays. As the evening wound down and guests prepared to leave, Constance Blackwood approached Lucy hesitantly. I'm ashamed, she said simply. Deeply ashamed. I chose shallow perfection over substance. I judged you without knowing you. And worse, I taught my son to do the same. She paused, gathering courage. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday I might earn it. Lucy studied the older woman. I don't need your apology, Mrs. Blackwood, but I appreciate it. What I need is for us all to do better. For the next soldier who comes home changed. For the next person whose scars show. For anyone who doesn't fit the Christmas card picture. Constance nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, we must do better. As the Blackwoods left, Brad hung back. Lucy, that promotion my mother mentioned earlier. It's actually a medical discharge review board position. We're revamping how the military handles wounded veterans' transitions. After tonight, would you consider consulting? We need voices like yours. Lucy almost laughed at the irony. Ask me after the holidays, she said. Tonight, I just want to be home with my family. The house grew quiet. Robert built up the fire while Patricia made hot chocolate, the real kind, with melted chocolate and whole milk, the way she used to when the girls were young. Emma curled up next to Lucy on the couch, holding her hand like she had when they were children. I was so scared, Emma admitted quietly. When you came home different, I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. I know, Lucy said. I didn't know how to talk to me either. Will you tell me more? Emma asked. Not just about that day, but about all of it? The good parts too? The people you served with? The places you saw? Lucy squeezed her sister's hand. Yeah, I'd like that. As midnight approached on Christmas Eve, the Anderson family sat together in their living room, no longer positioning themselves for a perfect photo, but simply being present with each other. The tree lights twinkled, the fire crackled, and for the first time in 3 years, Lucy didn't feel like a stranger in her own home. Her scar was still there, would always be there. But tonight, it didn't feel like something to hide. Tonight, it felt like what it had always been. Proof of a choice made, a life saved, a moment when an ordinary person did an extraordinary thing. And sometimes, that's enough to heal more than just the obvious wounds. Outside, church bells began to ring, welcoming Christmas Day. And in a warm house in Lincoln Park, a family began the long, necessary work of learning to see each other truly. Scars and all.